Okay, good morning everyone and welcome to the Study Medicine webinar organized as part of Science Week. Today we are joined by John Bracknell, Director of Medical Education and Consultant Neurosurgeon at Queen's Hospital, who is going to share his career path and talk about the medicine application process, access programs, resources and support available to students interested in pursuing this meaningful career. Over to you, John.
Great, thank you very much. So my name's John, and my current employment's been introduced by Stefania. Thank you very much for that, Stefania. I think you should be able to see my slides now.
Yes.
That's great. So this is a picture of where I work. It's called Queen's Hospital and it's in Romford, which is over in the east of the city above the river. I'd like to spend the next 10 minutes or so talking to you about my career path and then come on to the differences that are available to you today that weren't around when I was sitting in the sixth form at school. So when I was 16, I was at school in England doing science A-levels, and as well as doing those A-levels, I spent quite a lot of time in the music department, singing and playing the piano, and on the sports pitch doing rugby in the winter and the triple jump in the summer. The advice I got, the careers advice I got, steered me away from a decision to apply to do engineering at university towards medicine. And I confess I didn't think very hard about it really. I just put medicine down on the box and filled in the form and sent it off. I found myself 2 years later in university doing medicine. The questions that I were asked were, at interview were much more about science than they were about patients or hospitals or the clinical environment. And that, I think, was the way back then. I had the opportunity to do a research project in my third year at university, and that led me into an interest in research science, and particularly neuroscience. And I had the opportunity to extend my time at university to do a research degree as well. So I had the great privilege of being at university for 8 years and enjoyed every minute of it. Once I qualified as a doctor, it struck me that surgery was much more immediately appealing to me than medicine. There was something tangible and immediately effective about surgical intervention. And combining that with neuroscience and an interest there, I pursued neurosurgical training, and that took me up to Glasgow. That lasts quite a long time. I spent 10 years in training after I qualified and had the opportunity to do the last 18 months of that in Melbourne in Australia. So age 35, I got my job here in Romford, and that was 16 years ago now. And since then, I've done lots of other things. I've been able to develop a career as an educator, and that's taken me to work with lots of other organisations. QMUL, which is the university that includes Barts and the London Medical School, HEE, which is the government agency that runs medical training, as well as training in the other healthcare professions, the Royal College of Surgeons and the Joint Colleges Surgical Training Committee, which are the bodies that write the surgical curricula for training in the UK. And about 18 months ago, I made a decision to come back home to Romford and try and apply all the stuff I've learned about education to the environment here, which is in great need of improvement. And that's where I'm talking to you from today. So why might you choose to study medicine? Well, it's true that you can make a real difference to folk as a doctor. And I'd encourage you to think of that career path, the medical career path, in the broader context of healthcare careers. You can also make a real difference to people's lives as a nurse, as a physiotherapist, as a pharmacist, and all the other careers that surround clinical practice. Within medicine itself, there are lots of different specialties, and they all have slightly different appeals and slightly different approaches to life. And you can have the opportunity within medical school and afterwards to sample a lot of them and to work out where you fit in medicine. And there's a place for just about everybody within the variety that exists there. As well as teaching and education, doctors have the opportunity to engage in research, in management, and in clinical improvement, clinical governance. The day-to-day work can be really varied. You never see the same patient twice. That's not quite true, but of course the second time you see them, they're in a different position than they were the first time you saw them. So it's unlikely that you'll ever get bored in a medical career. The salary is all right. It starts off quite low, as you'd expect, but the job security is quite good, and the salary isn't just there for a few months while you're working. You can expect to earn that salary for the rest of your working life. And it's probably true that doctors will always be needed. So becoming unemployed as a doctor in the UK for the foreseeable future is quite unlikely. So how do you get in? I think you know this stuff already, and I think you probably know it better than me. But applying for medical school at the beginning of year 13, earlier if you want to go to some of the higher prestige universities, and through a different system, but UCAS is the standard form that you're all aware of, and I won't say anything more about that. I think it is true that the grades required to enter medical school are extraordinarily high. I spoke to a guy called Frank this week. Frank is a third-year medical student who was born and brought up just round the corner from our hospital in Romford, and went to a school here where the attainment rate is really very, very low. He was top of his class by a long way, but got straight Bs at GCSE. And that's really a difficult position to be in when you're applying to university. So Frank's advice had three parts in it, but Frank advice number one was exams, smash them. That's not negotiable. So I'll pass that advice on to you because it's fresh in my mind. In order to write a good personal statement, it's almost essential to have done some sort of work experience. Now, look, that's really tough, particularly in the COVID years. It's difficult to get into. Hospitals are rightly nervous about young people in their mix. They require careful supervision, and the time to do that's not easily available. And they represent an extra infection control risk in the environment. But we're also aware that it's vital to allow young people to access the clinical environment so they can make a really informed decision about whether it's for them. Your work experience doesn't necessarily need to be in hospital. It can be anywhere in the clinical environment, and if you can't find work experience in the clinical environment, find it outside the clinical world, perhaps in a lab base or something related to science or development or anything else really, because it all comes together in a hospital. You get some work experience in IT. Well, we run IT systems. You get an experience in administrative work or management. Well, there's plenty of that needed in healthcare. You take my point. But wherever you do your work experience, make sure you have your eyes open and think about what you see and write it down. This business of reflection on your work experience is perhaps the most important component of your personal statement as you put it together. Almost every medical school has an aptitude test requirement, and there are two going round, so make sure that you take the one that that applies to your chosen university. They are a bit different, the two tests, and they're designed to be aptitude tests, and that means they're designed to test your potential They're designed not to be influenced by study. But we know that that's not quite true. And practicing the questions in advance so that you understand their format and have some idea of how to answer the questions can dramatically improve your performance. So if you are looking down the barrel of one of these aptitude tests, it is worth practicing and it can make a difference. So once you get in, you should expect a medical course to take 5 or 6 years. If you already have a degree, there are some courses that can cut that down to 4 years, but going straight in from school, 5 years is the shortest you can do. After that, 2 years as a foundation doctor. That's a very broad-based experience where you'll see lots of different things and work under close supervision. And then after that, if you choose to continue to pursue a career in medicine, it's time to make a bit of a decision about what sort of doctor you want to be and apply for the relevant specialty training pathway. And that can be as short as another 3 years in general practice, or as long as another 8 years in the surgical and more technical medical specialties. So that's all well established and kind of matches the experience I got. What's different now? So I think the traditional path that I have laid out to you in my own career looks a bit like the purple sequence of boxes and arrows on this diagram. You might call that the traditional career path in medicine. But these days, that's not followed by very many people. And there's an enormous amount of flexibility that wasn't there before. You don't need to go straight from school to university. And in fact, as early perhaps as autumn 2023, there'll be an apprenticeship program to become a doctor. And so working in healthcare and taking an apprenticeship, which will last a little bit longer than the usual university course, probably will get you to the same point of qualifying for medical school. And at each stage in your journey, you can step out of training and step back into it. And if you're coming from somewhere else, you can enter training with the qualifications that you've acquired elsewhere at the appropriate stage. There's probably a trend towards earlier decision making in medicine than I've described. I made it sound as though I just sort of fell into it, really, and there's some truth in that. I certainly didn't give much thought to what I was doing right at the beginning. I think it's unlikely that someone who took that approach today would be successful in an application to medical school. And I think that probably makes sense. The things become much more vocational, much more focused on practice. So have a think about whether you want to do medicine, whether you really want to do medicine, whether you're attracted by a glamorous idea of what medicine might be but isn't really, whether you understand what doctors do. And once you're sure that is what you want to do, well, then think about how you can express that to someone else. How can you convince someone else that you really want to be a doctor? And once you've become a doctor, once you've qualified, have a think about what's around you. What sort of doctor do you want to be? And as soon as you've decided that, you can start working towards that particular area of practice to give yourself the best chance of advancing your career. When I was a medical student and a junior doctor, there was very little thought towards our well-being. We worked long hours, sometimes only getting half of the nights off in a week. There are 168 hours in a week, and people in my generation sometimes worked all of them, which was very bad for us indeed. But that doesn't happen anymore. And you will only work 48 hours a week at the most. And that's really very different. The work can be quite hard, but there is plenty of time outside to pursue family, friends, relationships, hobbies, other interests. And that work-life balance has become a really important part of careers advice to doctors after qualification. Now, because it's so difficult to get into university, and because it's much easier to get into university if you're from a posh leafy green school with excellent teachers and facilities than if you're in the sort of school that Frank went to, many medical schools offer access programs. And if you can get onto one of those, you'll have a bit of a foot up. You'll be able to talk to people who have already done it. You'll be able to talk to other people in your position. You'll have access to opportunities and programs and events online. And a bit of an idea about what you might stick on your personal statement. I've collected the following resources, some of which come straight from HEE, who have sponsored today's event, but others I've collected myself, and they're all here with the links behind them. I've already shared the slides with the school, and I'm sure they can share them with you if you're watching. There are other places to look for help. All of these national organisations have resources on their websites for students, and you can look them up at your leisure. And in London, there are some other particular events to look out for. There really is quite a lot going on where you can turn up and hear about this stuff and get some ideas and point you in the right direction. So I'm going to stop slowly sharing my slides now, and I hope that between those of you who are watching live and the questions you've already submitted to the college, we'll be able to do a bit of a question and answer session now for as long as that seems to be sensible. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you, John. That was very informative. So I was given a few questions. The first question, I know you mentioned the work-life balance, but one of the questions is it really easy to establish this balance between work and personal life and have a stress-free career within the medicine sector?
Yeah, look, as I pointed out already, this is a really important area. There is no doubt at all that the clinical world contains things that can be stressful. So the patients that you meet, particularly in the acute environment, are often distressed. They're often upset. They're often angry, confused. They're sometimes in pain. There is some horrible stuff around sometimes, like blood and poo and wee and puke and that sort of stuff. So it can be messy. A lot of things can happen very fast, and that makes people around you stressed. And so team relationships sometimes get a bit frayed. So there is certainly stress to be found in the medical world, and that shouldn't come as a surprise, I think.
No,
but
yeah,
what's important is the ability of those working in it to balance that stress against the other things in their lives that help them manage that. It's also true that that stress comes with the delivery of satisfaction. So by working through those stresses in real time, one gets a sense of achievement, of satisfaction. As one learns more, as one goes through one's career, one feels fulfilled in a way. And that balances some of the stress in real time. But yeah, is it easy to have a stress-free career? No, I don't think it is easy. But I don't think that's true of any meaningful career in 2022 or at any time in the past. But is it possible? Is it reasonably possible? Yes, absolutely.
Right, but probably resilience is one of the qualities that you would need to have.
I think that's true. I'm not sure that you need more resilience to be a doctor than you do to be a barrister or an engineer or a high-flying city accountant. There are stresses there as well, and some very hard work to do. But of course, the stress here. One can't interact with these sorts of environments without a degree of stress. But managing that is something that most of us find a way to do. So, yeah, I hope that answers your question a bit.
Absolutely, thank you. The next question is, could you advise on positive strategies to find relevant work experience?
Yeah. Look, I know this has become particularly hard in the last 2 years, really hard, because COVID shut it all down. And what people were left with was web-based events where they could talk to people who were doing it. And that was the closest you could get. I think things are starting to open up now. In Romford, we're looking to open up a work experience programme in June, and I know that many other organisations across the city are doing the same. Most work experience programmes concentrate on their local environment, so stay close to home. So you're in City and Islington, aren't you?
Yes.
Is your local hospital the Whittington or UC or North Mid? My geography is not perfect.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure. We need to check. I recently
But
started
find out
working
where
here.
your local hospital is and try there first. Where are your local GPs? You can't go to the GP practice that you're registered with, but where are the nearest local ones? Do any of them have space for you to pop in?
Okay.
Where are your local nursing homes? Volunteering at a nursing home is, once we're out of COVID, a win-win for both sides.
Yeah.
You need the help and you really need the experience. So that's a good place to look.
And when writing an application,
Yeah.
'cause I know some hospitals would have a template. What do you think would make a student stand out? What do you think students should really highlight when writing an application? Is it their motivation or their skills to apply for work experience within a hospital?
So whenever you're applying for an opportunity, why should they pick you? That's the question to answer, isn't it? So if I'm applying to, I don't know, the Whittington Hospital to go and volunteer in the A&E department, what have I got to offer you? Why on earth should they bother? So what is it about you that will help them? Are you local? Are you part of the community? Are you looking to become part of the long-term workforce solution for that organisation? Are you from a particular group of society that you feel might be underrepresented at this organisation? Can you bring that? Can you add to their diversity? Is there something special that you did? I don't know, maybe you were a St John's ambulance person, or actually you've done a lot of arts and crafts and you might be able to bring that to the therapy department, or whatever it is. What have you got to offer? I have to say that running our own programme here, we're looking to schools, career services, the boroughs, to make recommendations to us. Okay. So we're looking to hand that off to the other side of the fence to say, you send us the people who you think really need it.
Okay, that's great, thank you. And how much time should students plan for a UCAT preparation test to prepare and to practice? So for how long do they need to practice?
Do you think there's something about the more you do, the better you get? I think that's a generic truth, isn't it? That if you're practicing something, the more practice you do, the better you get. I think there's a book that lots of people do for UK CAT, for example, that has 600 questions in it, and folk work through a lot of them. There are some websites that have collected questions and ways of sitting them online, and I think it's worth spending time with these resources. Now, Frank had something to say about aptitude tests as well, by the way.
Okay.
Frank said that he spent 3 months in advance doing 1 or 2 hours before work every day.
Ah, excellent.
That's quite a lot of time, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I think the message is there's no right answer to that question.
Yeah.
Do as much as you can.
And it's all subjective, and we all have different ways to learn and different learning styles. So, but it's good to hear about Frank's experience. Yeah. And the final question is, have you come across colleagues who left the profession, and what was the reason why they left? They decided to change career.
So people leave medicine like every other career. In fact, the retention rates in medical careers are very high. It's unusual to leave.
Okay.
Part of that is perhaps because it's an absorbing and rewarding career, but part of it is because there's something quite unhealthy about the way we view people who leave the career. And as a whole, as a generalization, medicine's a bit of a train track, and people tend not to leave, and perhaps they leave it too late. But why do people leave? Well, sometimes it's because they have a better offer. So one of the common things to do in the early years of a medicine career is to go and work in pharma. Pharma quite like people who've done a bit of clinical work to come and work with them. Some people go off into high-flying research careers. I had a trainee 10 years ago who went to manage a large research group for the Deep Thought program at Google. And he was racked with guilt. He came to see me. He said, oh gosh, I feel like I'm letting everyone down. I can't let go of my training position. And I said, are you joking? Look at what you've got on offer here. Go and do it. And he's still doing that now. Sometimes people leave because they feel that the work-life balance, they want to manage it in a different way. But it's certainly possible to work part-time as a locum, occasionally as one wants to. So some people leave substantive jobs in medicine, but still do a bit, or do a bit of clinical work as part of a portfolio of other stuff.
Yes, that's great. That's good to hear. Excellent. So I want to say thank you again, John, for taking the time out of your busy schedule and share your experience with our students. We've now come to the end of the webinar, which has really flown by. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Hopefully you have enjoyed the session and finally enjoy the rest of British Science Week. Thank you.
Bye-bye.